Morning. Oh, there we are. We are.
Golf, sickness, and pregnancy. What do those three things have in common? Golf, sickness, and pregnancy. I'm not sure what you're coming up with, but they're all situations where people feel like they can give you lots of advice. And we've been going through the book of Colossians and exploring this book which Paul gives advice to these people who are choosing to follow Jesus, who have discovered him, and who are leaning into the way of Jesus and doing life with him. And if you've been here for the last few weeks, this is chapter 3. And in the first two chapters, we've looked at the challenge that faced the church in Colossae. And these are people who are new believers, but they had others who were coming in and saying, look, you can follow Jesus, but to be Christian, you need to add some things onto what Jesus provides. It's not just following Jesus, there's other things. And we looked at, there are kind of three things which come up in this letter. They said you needed Jesus plus performance, or Jesus plus rules and legalism. You need Jesus plus a certain knowledge, an early Gnosticism as it was at the time, or some other different philosophies which the Greeks were trying to bring into the church. Or you need Jesus, you need to live in a certain way so that you can rid yourself of all the things in your body that you don't want and the things that you don't want to do, and do the things you do want to do. And at the time, it's called like an ascetic mysticism. It's about experience, it's about what you do with your body, it's about having more than just Jesus in your life. And so Paul's writing to the church who these false teachers have come in and said, Jesus is not really God. He's not enough on his own. He's less than God. And because of that, to have a genuine spirituality, a genuine walk, you need to have more knowledge in certain areas. You need to keep these certain rules. You need to have these different experiences in your life in order for you to reach this point where you are a true Christian. And Paul's writing to say, hey guys, it's not about what you add. It's the fact that Jesus is greater. Jesus is greater than all those things. And if you keep your focus on him, that's where you need to be. And this is what Matthew looked at last week. How Jesus is everything. Jesus is central. Jesus is all. We don't need to add anything else to it. We just got to follow Jesus. And Paul's writing to them saying, hey guys, don't let this stuff drag you in. Don't let the add-ons distract you. Jesus is greater. Make him greater. And so the first two chapters are quite theological. But now we move into chapter 3. And in chapter 3, Paul switches gears. If you have Bibles, open up to Colossians. I know we're doing chapter 3, but open up to Colossians chapter 2. Colossians chapter 2, verse 23. I'm going to have it on the screen as well, but if you've got a Bible, open up. If you've got a blue Bible, page 1016. Colossians chapter 2, verse 23, and it says this: such regulations, Paul's referring to all the things he's just talked about, all the things we just covered, such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. He's saying all these things, they might look good, they might look like they're the best way to go, they might actually look wise and clever and smart, but when it comes to what you want to achieve, they're not actually going to help. And when it talks about that part, lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence, basically what it means is they're no help in controlling your natural desires. You know, there's moments where you're like, I really just want to I think they deserve a word, and I feel like I need to give them a word. And you want to say that, but you know, maybe in your head and your heart, you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't. Or you're like, oh, I really want to do that. I really want to say that. I really want to get involved in that. But you're like, oh, I know I shouldn't, but I want to. I shouldn't, but I want to. And you find yourself in this space Paul talks about in Romans where like, all the stuff I don't want to do is the stuff I'm doing. The stuff I do want to do is what I'm not doing. I had a conversation with someone a while ago, and they were kind of explaining this situation that was going on in their life. And they're saying, I do love Jesus. I want to follow Jesus, but I find it really hard to stop doing this other stuff that I know I shouldn't be doing. Like, how do I do that? How do I get control? How do I stop doing that stuff? And they had tried kind of all the things similar to what these people had offered to the Colossians. They tried like being really strict on themselves and try to have this incredible control over their body. They'd tried thinking different ways and kind of different therapies, and those things hadn't seemed to help. And I think that's what Paul is addressing here. In the Colossian church, they've got two challenges. How do you address all these intellectual add-ons that people are putting onto them, but also how do you deal with this pull of these natural desires which are pulling you in a certain direction and you don't want to go that way? And so in chapter 3, Paul gets practical. And that's what we're going to look at. And he gets specific. And Paul gives, I've whittled it down to 3 pieces of advice that I think come out of this chapter. And it stays completely true to his original idea of we need to make Jesus greater. We need to make him greater because he is greater than all those things. And so that's what we're going to look at in chapter 3. As Nadia read, as we were singing the songs, it starts off with this. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and now your life is hidden with Christ in God. And I want to start at that end bit first, because that's really interesting. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. What is he talking about by the fact that your life is hidden? Now, when you think of hiding something, there's probably 2 reasons why you'd hide something. First one is if you want to keep it safe. If you want to keep something safe, put it somewhere people can't find it. The second reason is probably you hide something if you don't want people to see it, if you want it to be secret. So what does it mean that our lives are hidden with Christ? Well, perhaps it is that our lives are safe with Jesus. Our lives are safe with him because nothing can change that, nothing can take that away. If you choose to follow him, your life is secure in Jesus for now, for eternity. But also, there's a secrecy to it as well. And a lot of commentators suggest that what this is talking about is that as you choose to follow Jesus, because of your life and how you live, there's an aspect to that which remains kind of unknown and not understood by those watching, by those who don't know Jesus. The things that you do, the way you live, the way you act, to other people, it looks kind of secret and hidden because it doesn't make any sense. Why would you choose to do that? To the rest of the world, it seems like we are dead to the world because our source of life is not in this world. It goes beyond that. And so we have this secret, safe, hidden life with Jesus, but it's up to us to experience that. So you can't experience that new life while you're still trying to live in the old. Does anyone have a dishwasher? Who has dishwashers? Okay, who doesn't? Okay. Random question, but bear with me. Who has a dishwasher but doesn't use it? Okay, a few hands. you do the way you want to do your dishes. This is not my wheelhouse. But I was talking to someone who had a dishwasher and never used it. And we were saying, they're so good. Like, they're so helpful. You just put the dishes in, you put the stuff in, it cleans the dishes, it's amazing. They're like, no, I've always done them by hand. It just feels right to do it by hand. Like, oh, you should try it. So they tried it. And they said, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. Like, it is so good. Now, that may not be you, and that's okay. But it just illustrates this point that if we're living in the old, we're never going to get to experience the new that Jesus has for us. And when you live this new life with Jesus, it brings something with it. You know, you heard Josh talk about what Jesus means to him and the decision that he's making to follow Jesus and get baptized. And with that comes this change. The New American Commentary puts it this way. Conversion includes a radical change of mind which produces the desire for separation from the world. Conversion includes a radical change of mind which produces a desire for separation from the world. That's what it's saying is, this calls, when you choose to follow Jesus, it calls for a reset of your heart and of your mind, to do things differently than you used to do. And so going back to our verse, this is what Paul's talking about just before the hidden part. It says, since then you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above. In the original Greek, it basically says, seek where Jesus is. Put your heart, desire to be where he is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above. Literally, it just says, think things above, not on earth. Think things above, not on earth. Seek Jesus. That's what he's calling us to do. That's what he's calling you to do. That's what he's calling the believers in Colossians to do. But those things aren't easy because those things take time. If you want to seek Jesus, if you want to set your mind on things above, you can't do that in the busyness of life. You've got to take time to do that. And Paul's advice is that if you want to be with Jesus, if you want to seek Jesus, if you want to set your minds on him, it's going to require you to put some effort into that. Paul's advice, be with Jesus. And two easy ways you can do that with your time and with the text, with scripture, with your day. The wording of be with Jesus comes from John Mark Comer, who wrote a book, Practicing the Way, which our young adults have just gone through. But he says this, in the digital age, it's now possible to go your entire life without ever being truly alone with God. Our devices keep us tethered to the world of noise and regularly drown out the voice of God in our heart. We are starved for solitude, living through a global famine of quiet. Noise refugees seeking a new home where we can find rest in God. So how are you spending time with God? When are you spending time with God? Where are you spending time with God? Perhaps it's with a Bible, a journal, and a pen. Perhaps it's with, yes, you can do it with a phone. It is possible. I want to recommend this app to you. It's called Lectio 365. It's put together by the guys from Prayer 24/7. And basically, this app guides you through 5 or 10 minutes of prayer time with God. It's simple. It's straightforward. But what it does is it gives you a good reason and a reminder, if you set it up on your phone, to actually pause. Find that solitude, find that quiet space, and spend that time with God. The green is one that you use for teens, youth, young adults. in there's also a link to a family one where you can do this with your family, and it's more based around how kids would respond. So your first step that Paul's suggesting is spend time with Jesus. And when you spend a lot of time with someone, something interesting happens. You start to become a lot like them. It's pretty straightforward. This isn't rocket science. This isn't anything you haven't heard before. But as you spend a lot of time with someone, you get to know them. You start mirroring some of their actions. You start knowing how they respond in different situations. And you start to become a little bit like them. And so, Paul is saying, spend time with Jesus. And as you do, there's this change which will take place. He goes on, verse 5. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. You used to walk in these ways. I like that he's using past tense. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge, in the image of its creator. All this stuff, he's like, this is the stuff that you want to get rid of. This is the stuff you want to take out. And what he's saying is, as you take this stuff out, you're going to become like Jesus. And so he gives this list. And as he does, there's all these things says, hey, take this stuff out. You want to subtract this from your life. But then, while you're taking that away, there's other stuff that you add in its place. And this is what he says in the rest of the passage. The list is up there, but let me read it to you. Therefore, with all these things gone, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace. And be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and instruct one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. If you look at that list on the right, I'd like to say it looks like me, but it doesn't. It looks a lot more like Jesus. Paul's advice is, when you spend time with him, when you set your mind on him, when you set your heart on him, when you seek to put him at the center of your life, his desires will become your desires. His loves will become your loves. He'll start to grow into you, and you'll start to become like he is. I don't know if you've ever met a couple that have been together for quite a while. There was some research in the 70s that suggested that couples that have been together for over 15 years start to look like each other. That was taken as proof and reliable until they did some studies about 15 years ago, and they realized, yeah, no, that's not true. Actually, nothing to back that up. The original study was done on 10 couples. They did it later with I think it's 350 with much more analysis, and they went, no, that's not true. It doesn't happen. But what does happen is the more time you spend with someone, you just get to know what they're like. You could probably finish their sentences because you know how they respond. You could probably tell what they're going to do in a certain situation based on the time you've spent with them. So how do you become like Jesus? You spend time with him. You look at this addition list. And there's something interesting as you look at that list on the right. There's a few things that aren't showing there. But to live out that list, what do you need? If you're going to put all those things into practice, how do you do it? you don't do it by yourself. It's impossible. It's really hard to show humility if you just do everything without other people around. It's hard to show patience if you do everything without other people around. William Barclay makes this interesting quote. It's most significant to note that every one of the virtues and graces listed has to do with personal relationships between men and man, people. There is no mention of virtues like efficiency, cleverness, or even diligence or industry. Not that these are not important, but the great basic virtues are the virtues which govern and set the tone of human relationships. Christianity is community. So how do you live this out? How do you become like Jesus? Can I suggest you do it in community? Where you have people around you who love you, who support you, who also know Jesus and are trying to hold you accountable to living the way he lives. I have a friend that I call once a week, and we have a chat, and we ask each other a few different questions to hold each other accountable to the way we want to walk following Jesus. It takes about 10, 15 minutes. But if you have somebody or people in your life that you can do this with, the Bible has a cool word for it. They call it church. If you have people you can do this with, then you have these people who are holding you accountable and saying, hey, I know you want to follow the way of Jesus. I want to encourage you and walk with you and help you to do that. That's why we do gatherings. That's why we do groups. That's why we catch up. That's why we pray together. Because in doing that, we are able to hold each other accountable to living the way that Jesus is calling us to live. The third thing, be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and start doing what Jesus did. Verse 18 says, wives, submit to your husbands. And before you amen that too hard, the way Jesus submitted to his Father in the Garden of Gethsemane. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, but yet not as I will, but as you will. Husbands, love your wives. The way that Jesus did when he said in John 3:16, for God so loved, agaped, selfless, not for me, nothing in this for me, this is all about you and my love for you kind of love. Children, obey your parents, like Jesus obeyed God. When Judas was coming to arrest him in Gethsemane, Jesus says, Satan is coming, the prince of this world is coming, and he says, he comes so that the world may know that I love the Father and do exactly what my Father has commanded me. Now, parents, before you get too caught up on that one, he goes on. Fathers, this word is used a few times for parents. Fathers, be patient with your kids. Like Jesus was patient with the disciples. Over and over again, they didn't get it. But instead of berating them and getting frustrated at them, he walked them through it and he explained to them, guys, this is what I'm trying to do. But then he goes on. Slaves, obey your masters. Now, none of us are slaves, but you may be able to relate if you're an employee or if you have a teacher. Obey your masters like Jesus obeyed God, where he said, I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. Masters, employers, owners, teachers, managers, leaders, provide for your slaves. Provide for those that you have been given authority over. Like Jesus provided for the people. When they're all sitting around and he'd spoken to them and he sees those 5,000, he says, I have compassion for these people. They've been with me for 3 days and they have nothing to eat. So Paul's advice, be with Jesus. Spend time with the text. Become like Jesus. Commit yourself to community. Do what Jesus did. Take action. Do something about one of these things. When I think about the advice that Paul was giving the church and what it means for us, if I could put it into a picture, when I wanted to get better at tennis, I went to a coach. I had a problem where I was often, especially on a serve, turning a serve, I'd often hit the ball into the net. And so I went to this coach and we had sessions and he said, all right, I know when you're playing a game, your aim is to keep the ball within the court. That's what the rules are. That's what you're trying to focus on. But I want you to shift your focus. When you're returning the ball, I don't want you to worry about whether it goes in or not. I want you to hit the back fence. I want you to hit the back fence on the full. I was like, but if I play a game, I'm not going to be able to, that's not good practice, is it? He's like, trust me, this is my advice. I want you to try, I'm going to serve, and every time I want you to try and hit the back fence on the full. And it felt uncomfortable, it felt awkward, it felt a little bit wrong because that's not what you're supposed to do. But as I did it, it started to shift the way I was thinking. He's like, all right, no, I'm not hitting it to the net, I'm hitting it over the net, it's going over, this is good, and then he started to imprint this so much in my head that as I was playing games, I wouldn't actually worry about if my return got in or not. I'd be like, yeah, that was good, it nearly hit the fence. People I were playing loved it. They thought it was amazing. But what he was trying to get me to think about was focus on what's going to help you get to the place you want to be. Look at something beyond what I can currently see, beyond what my current natural action wants to do. Head in the direction of where I want to go. And so when Paul's talking to the Colossians, and their problem is how do you deal with all these intellectual add-ons and the pull of your own physical desires and where they're taking you, his advice is focus on something greater. Don't get caught up in the nitty-gritty. Focus on something that is greater than what you're currently looking at. Be with Jesus. Become like Jesus. Do what Jesus did. As the band come up, we're gonna sing a song that talks about responding to what Jesus is calling you to do. And I want to encourage you, if God is tapping on your heart and saying, this is where I want you to be, this is something that I have for you, which of these is God inviting you to focus on? Is it about spending time with him? Is he encouraging you to spend time with him so that you can focus on becoming more like him? Or maybe he's saying, hey, you're doing this, but I want you to step out. I want you to start doing the things that I do. I want you to represent me to your kids, to your spouse, to your neighbors, to those that you manage, those that you lead, or maybe to those who are above you, who are encouraging you, guiding you, directing you, teaching you. Which of these is God asking you to step into? And my advice is to lean into that. Don't let us pass away, but actually ask him, God, if this is what you want me to do, can you just really make it clear, impress it upon me? And just have that conversation while we're singing the final song.